First of all, thank you to Warner Brothers Animation for donating our new animated video. And it was an all-women team that created it. And our thanks to our good friend Mindy Kaling for narrating it. So we've been waiting for this day, this moment, since the last summit ended in 2018. This time, however, in the face of the coronavirus epidemic, we are suggesting networking without hugs and handshakes and sticking with smiles and waves. But on a serious note, please stay safe in the coming weeks and months, and we're thrilled that you're all here. Our Embrace Ambition campaign is now become emblematic of a much larger story. How has bias and stereotypes impacted women's equality? There's an old riddle. A father and a son are in a car accident. The father dies instantly, and the boy is taken to the hospital. The doctor comes in and exclaims, "I can't operate on him. He's my son." Who is the doctor? Okay, so for those of you, I heard the right answer there, but for those of you that might not have heard it before, surprise, the doctor was his mother. So here's the embarrassing thing I'm going to confess today, and that it's taken me many decades to admit. As a young, ardent feminist, when I first heard that riddle, I couldn't figure it out. That is the power of unconscious bias. In the decades since I was stumped, there has been progress, but not in the way you might expect. Today, when asked that same riddle, people are just as likely to say he has two dads than to say his doctor was his mother. And that is the enduring power of unconscious bias when it comes to women. So how is it possible that most people can't solve this riddle? And why? The simple answer is the world's default is male. For thousands of years, women just haven't been in the picture. In a world made by men and for men, women have been made invisible. And when we are seen, it's almost always through the male gaze. The history of humanity is man's history, and by that, I don't mean the collective meaning of man, I mean man. But history told from only one perspective is the fertilizer of bias. It's at the root of all bias. There's this great West African proverb, and it's, "Hunters would no longer be heroes if lions could tell their own stories." So what has been the impact of women being left out of our history books until fairly recently? There's the brilliance bias, for starters. When you think of brilliant people in history, women don't come to mind easily because they've been left out. As a result, even today, few women are called brilliant. Think about it. And that impacts our sense of self. Not surprisingly, recent research shows women tend to assess their intellect accurately, while men of average intelligence think they are more intelligent than 2/3 of other people. Just gonna let that sit there. When women aren't seen in history, there's the "if you can't see it, you can't be it" bias. In grade school, I went on a class trip to the Guggenheim Museum and came home to excitedly tell my mother that the museum was filled with the work of this amazing woman artist, Joan Moreau. My mother had to break it to me that Jean Moreau was a Frenchman. I still remember my dejection. There wasn't a woman artist written about in Janssen's History of Art until 1987. Yet today, we're learning that the majority of the cave painters were probably women, not to mention the hundreds of master artists whose works and stories have been resurrected in every genre and every era. History is not objective, and it's often carefully curated, as we'll hear later this morning. It's why your personal stories and family stories are so important. Write your stories. I did about my great-grandmother, Giovanna, and I felt like I was reclaiming history. To be here today, we asked people to answer the question, how have you overcome stereotypes and embraced ambition? Nearly 2,500 people took the time to reply, and we thank everyone who did. but we were only able to accept 500 applicants, and it was hell, seriously. Yet, we heard the most amazing stories in the process. You told us about being the only woman in the room, about being treated as second string when you got pregnant. You wrote about opening doors for your daughters and educating your sons, not only for the world as it is, but what you imagine it could be. You have overcome great stereotypes, barriers, and assaults on your bodies, your identity, and your dreams. But damn, did you persevere. We were so taken with your statements that we asked 9 women to share their stories today throughout today's program. Their introduction cards will say audience speaker, and I am seriously so excited for you to meet them. Women make history when we become the heroes of our own lives and the authors of our own stories. Thank you to the many women who have shared their stories, because these are the stories I hope we never lose again. Your stories, our stories. At the first summit, I talked about my beloved son who is transgender, and how in coming to terms with that, I realized that my bias had nothing to do with him being trans. My bias was he was male. I had to accept the ugly reality that I was biased against men. Here's when I knew I had made progress. This ridiculously adorable baby is my grandchild. When our daughter told us she was pregnant, I wasn't secretly hoping it was a girl. All that mattered was that my daughter and son-in-law had the opportunity to raise a brilliant, ambitious, empathetic human being. With the many changes facing all of us today, we see you, celebrate each of you, we hear your stories, and we have hope. I'm more optimistic than ever before that my granddaughter, yes, it's a girl, for now, that she will grow up in a world where women, look at that, you can't make that up, where women will be truly visible. Thank you.